Hello, I'm Brad.
I'm Sharon.
And I'm Jason.
Welcome to Curiosity. I am super excited today because this is the very first time on the show that we have ever had a couple, let alone a powerhouse dynamic couple such as yourselves. And I'm just really looking forward to hearing all about the Sharon and Jason Romano story. So welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you
very
Thank
much.
you for having us, Brad.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it's so cool. So the two of you have, I would say, embodied the rebellious optimism spirit at the core of your humanity in every single way. And I would love to just kick off with hearing a little bit about why you get out of bed every day.
Sharon, you take that one.
Well, I mean, we get out of bed every day because we have 5 dogs in our room. But besides that, there's a lot of work to do. Just building our dream, this resort in East Texas, ARP. I always say ARP with 1 A, not 2.
It's
But
probably good to
quickly closing
clarify.
in on that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So take us back to the beginning of this journey.
You want me to handle that one? Or you want to take it?
I can start because he's the closer, you know?
Perfect.
So
Got to bring in the closer at some point.
it really kind of started with our daughter. She used to ride horses competitively. She started at 6 years old, and we started going out to this facility in Tyler, Texas. And it was just beautiful. It made us feel like Kentucky would feel with horses, hills and trees, and just it was this wonderful spot that was not like being in the city. And so from there, we decided to look at land. And that's kind of how that started.
Wow. And where were y'all at the time?
We were in Dallas.
Okay.
So it was about 90 minutes away.
Okay.
The funny thing about finding that property was that we had this list of properties where we were kind of managing where we were going, but there was no order. So it was like all over here, all over there, back this way, you know, all of these different directions, trying to get GPS. And you're like in rural East Texas. So I was getting really aggravated.
You had to pull out the Rand McNally map.
So we
go back to paper.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, where's Google Maps printout when you need it? And so he's like, it wasn't on our list of properties. And he said, I like this road right here because it was kind of off the main drag. Let's just drive up there. And so we did. And there happened to be this property for sale. And it literally had this old rusted sign and one of those info tubes. And inside it was one piece of paper. And it was like had been copied over and over, you know. And so it was you know, kind of drawn out what the land was, what the price was. So it was really this kind of very serendipitous that ended up
You're
being.
using Brad's word.
It's a great word. The serendipity of the universe, just like converging and like the wonder of existence. Like those kind of moments are so special and so rare. It was just meant to be. Wow. I love that.
It's pretty crazy because we had a list, as Sharon said, of I think something like 25 properties, and we drove and drove and drove, and you know, not here, not there, not here. And part of the parameters of what we were trying to do is really find a place. You know, we've all been to these places or properties for events or weddings or friends' ranches and places, and it's like, gosh, are we ever going to get there? You know, it's down a road and left turn and right turn. And what was incredible about what ended up being now High Hill property is that it's only 2 turns off of I-20. And so that made it so simple. But as we wove through all those East Texas woods, we were really kind of getting what we didn't even realize, the general experience of what people that come there get from the beginning, from the very first drive in. And as Sharon mentioned, you know, that last piece of property on a list of 25 properties on a piece of paper was it. Mm-hmm. And the piece that is now the expanded community phase 2 piece was the actual piece of property that was on the list of things for sale. And we ended up buying the one behind it and now own both, you know, after all these years. But it's really fun to look back, and you say that I hadn't told that story in a lot of years either. It's neat to hear again. So.
And there's a lot of land in ARP, so eventually you're just going to buy up all the land in the region.
take over the whole
That's
area.
That's what it sounds like.
My wife always tells me, as we started this venture, Jim, like, we need that piece next door because someone's going to, mess up our border. And she's like, Jason, every land has a border. Like,
Or it doesn't.
Or it doesn't.
It does until it
It
doesn't.
just keeps going.
What is that? The road goes on forever.
The party never ends. That's right.
Also, where the sidewalk is.
That's right.
And the dirt road begins, I guess. That's
Something like
amazing.
Isn't that awesome?
So prior to ARP, you were in Dallas.
Yes.
What was going on at that time in your lives?
A whole lot. Like
Yeah.
anybody's. We were, a young family, I
Yeah.
guess. Now we still think we're young, but not so much anymore. College kid graduated last week, and one
Congrats.
Yeah.
still in college, but it's been a fast and furious ride. But
We bought the property in 2012. So the kids were like 11 and 8. So we were living in, this great neighborhood, kids running all over the place. I mean, it was like what you think of suburban America. Kids had the code to the gate in the back and they'd come running up to the back door, football in the front yard. So I was good,
Yeah.
where I
love that.
was
Yeah,
at that time.
That was great. Life was perfect. And then there was a shift, which we'll get to in a little bit. That's very
Yes.
interesting. So what else was going on in Dallas? What were y'all doing professionally? What was kind of the day-to-day life at that point?
we had been building our construction company for, at that point, probably 15 years or so at that point. We started the business and then grew it into bigger and bigger things. And
How
so
did you
we were,
start? And I'm leading the witness a little bit on this one because I have heard this story and I think it's pretty fascinating.
I'm going to jump in kind of listening to so many of Brad and Scott podcasts today driving in, but it was great to listen and kind of think through so many things. And I love the repetitive word through all of the podcasts we heard was journey. And I would really, credit that to Sharon and I, where we sit today. It's been a journey, right? A real journey, not always great. On a business level, fortunately, always sound on a marriage level.
I need to take some notes.
I always tell her is she's like, you're insane. What are we doing? And I just always tell Sharon,
Daily.
never daily. Yeah.
It's great confidence builder. It keeps the ego in check. It's awesome.
Never forget the joy of the journey. And so, what was going on in Dallas, so many things. I was a finance grad from SMU and, thought I was going to do some fancy pants business stuff, as a 22-year-old, 3-year-old. And Sharon I met, she was working for a big law firm in Dallas and client services for years and had little kids and, decided one day she was really tired of what she was doing. We had 2 little babies at the time. And she's like, I can't do this anymore. The kids, the work, the whole thing. I need to be with our kids more. And I said, okay, just quit, and so there kind of really began our journey because we were starting. I mean, we always say, we were dirt poor. We had $100, in a week to eat, and like so many young families starting, especially in an entrepreneurial effort, you decide at some point to take this leap, and it's again, we'll steal from your what, how, why, how, what scenario there. And my question always is what if,
Yeah.
and I think I've thought a lot about that. What if, and so growing up in an entrepreneurial family, it was always, there wasn't an option. You just did it. And I think that's kind of like this, jumping off the side of a cliff. And so there was a lot of push there, again, what do we do? Here we sit, now, and I always loved my God-given gift and talent and love was for architecture and to build, and grew up in a family of an engineer and a designer and mother and father. And so it was time to make a change. And so that's where it really kind of began. We literally were like, okay, so we had a friend in Sunday school who needed a deck built in their backyard And it ironically was almost to the dollar amount of what we needed to cover our monthly expenses. And that was the kickoff of our construction company that we now have run and operated for almost 30 years.
So I think that's really fascinating because you said yes in a moment when you weren't necessarily qualified, if that's the right word.
For sure not. Yeah.
And you just kind of cannonballed into it and allowed human ingenuity to really take over and just apply some logic and some common sense and some skills and go and bring it to life. And I think that's really fascinating because we oftentimes, I think, have opportunities that we will start to allow doubt to creep in, and we'll allow, all the feelings that we have as humans to start to take over. And I'm sure we all have moments where we could say yes and we could say no. And there's so much power sometimes in just saying yes to something and just seeing how it turns out, being comfortable knowing that it may not go as well as I would like, but just leaning into that passion and into that dream. I think that's so powerful and such a cool thing. Sharon, I want to come back to you for a moment. So you have this career that seems to be rocking, and you're doing some really cool things in corporate America. And what's going through your mind in this moment when you're talking about it and Jason goes, just quit?
I was ready.
Okay.
I wasn't ready to be a stay-at-home mom for the first time with a baby and then a 3-year-old. And that was really scary, especially because he is the man of the strong faith and let's just do it. And I'm the one on the sides that's like, well, what if this? I don't have to worry about that. And what do we do here? And what are we going to do about tomorrow? And he's like, we don't have tomorrow. We have today. So we have to. And it was the best thing, but it was scary as hell. Yeah. And I remember exactly where we were. It was like a rainy day. We were at, on the frontage road of 635 near Preston Road. And he said, let's just do it. And it was just like kind of rainy and cold. And it was like, that was just that turn in the road that made things completely different than they would have been, if we'd stayed doing what we were doing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you're at this moment where a lot's changing. You have quit your job. You're way ahead of the Great Resignation. You're just a trendsetter is what I'm really hearing. Doing the things that you love and that
in
you're passionate about.
Yes,
so many things, Brad.
Just a full-fledged trendsetter. Got it. That totally fits you.
That saying, behind every good man's a really great woman.
Yeah.
This is the example.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Behind, in front, by the side, above,
amen.
All the things. Over. Yeah, over. It's amazing. And kind of within that same time period, you're leaving the business that you had also started to pivot into construction.
That's right.
I mean, that's a pretty awesome, audacious, bold moment as a young couple with young children to just lean into and trust yourselves and what you could create. And I think that is so powerful that you took the time to do that. I mean, ever since you first told me this story, I've thought about it a lot because I want to go back to the saying yes. Sometimes I think that's what we need to do is just say yes to something that we're dreaming about and that we believe in, and almost believe in ourselves enough to give it a shot. And so you did that. And then the second job came pretty soon after, right?
Yeah. I think I also told you at some point, and listening to you say it like that is really retrospective. I mean, I hadn't really thought about all those components like that, but it's amazing when someone paints the picture like you've just done, and it kind of, your history of life and journey are compiled into a sentence. It's kind of whoa, and it's like I'm hearing my eulogy or something. But I think I may have told you that for me,
total badass. That's going to be the title.
For me, I may have told you, and not to hit an emotional standpoint, but I was raised by a very amazing dad and mom, and my father was we always say the real patriarch of all of us as kids and family, but also so many people. And our joke used to be that he beat us into he loved us into submission, not beat us. He loved us. He loved
That's
it.
another
That's a funny
podcast.
thing. Yeah, that's another
show.
podcast. No, he loved us into
It's gonna get
submission.
real.
He was a tough guy from a different generation who knew how to get things accomplished, and a brilliant man, brilliant businessman, and so he reared us all with that kind of iron fist of love, really. And I say that because he was tough as nails, and you never crossed him. But you knew that there was no one on the planet that loved you more than he did, and so he had died suddenly just before kind of all of this catalyst. And I think for me, it was really this gigantic push in life. We had always worked really hard to do things for ourselves, but I think as a son of a father, a patriarch, I'll put it that way, you always have the shelter. And it wasn't really financial, and thank God we were young and poor, and he would occasionally help, and it was like, here's a little bit of money for the month, and it was like, oh, thank you, it's $500, we could like eat, or whatever it was, but and it wasn't really that. It was just always knowing, I think, having that safety net of emotional support, like I always say you go home as a grown guy, man, and you'd be with dad and you felt like you were 5 years old again. So it was just this thing. And so I think having him die suddenly on us, not just on me, on all of us, was a gigantic loss and a gigantic push. And so for me personally, I think it's probably one of the biggest pivot points in my life that I can say, can you name a pivot point? And it was that. And then I had my number one priority, which is this one. And so I didn't really have a choice at that point. I could either struggle along or I was going to do something extraordinary. And I think I've said this to you before, and now sitting at 53, I can sit here and tell you and so many other people as we try on a regular basis to encourage younger people all the time that are looking for something new in their lives or in their marriages or in their relationships, that God really made every single one of us to be extraordinary, and that the world does its best to make you ordinary. And so I think at that, it was one of those wake up and I am extraordinary and I can do things because of my faith and the support and love of my wife. And then I have no choice because I have 2 kids that I've got to figure out how to take care of. And so that was really, you talk about pendulum. And it was kind of this, I'm working along here and all's fine. And I have this, I always have dad, he can support and handle. And then when he was just suddenly yanked from us, it was just like, what do we do now? Yeah. And Sharon's like, I'm miserable. I can't do this. I have these kids I've got to work with. And I'm like, quit, So I think we look back and think of the simplicity of the statement, but the reality of it, it was a gigantic change. And also for who we grew to become, and to have that kind of strength and support from your spouse is huge. And Sharon started to touch on the move, it wasn't easy for her, a lot easier for me because it was probably more my plan and vision of what I thought was a plan for us. And we had worked so long to get to the point where we were in Dallas at that point that, let's move to Arp, Texas in the middle of nowhere is a big statement.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I'm really excited to get to that in a bit. It's just so fascinating how you rallied together and you believed in yourselves. And again, I think that's something that we don't do enough. I think that in daily life, I've spent a lot of time contemplating this, especially since the pandemic. There were so many factors that happened in that time period. And I feel like we're only now on the precipice of really beginning to uncover what's just on the other side of the ripple effects and the impacts that had on humanity globally. I had someone tell me recently, it's one of the only times in human history where everyone around the globe had a shared experience. And that everyone, when you say that word, it's relatable. There's feelings, there's emotions, there's a reality that comes from that. And I think one of the things that came from that is the power of the pause. It gave us an opportunity to start to ask ourselves, what do we want out of life? But I think the noise is picking back up again. And it's not as quiet as it was a year ago or 2 years ago or almost 3 years ago now. And believing in yourself is such a powerful gift. and really trusting yourself to go and create and build and carve out the reality that you want to build. Sky and I have a life motto. It's, and so together they built the life they loved. And we are, every day intentionally striving to build the life that we love. And we have no idea, what some of those components are and what the future is going to hold. But to believe in yourself, I think, is where you have to start. And so if we can stay on this construction company part just for a moment, because I think it's so fascinating. So you build a deck and a fence. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome. And then the next job is building what?
So very briefly, my father again was a man of many sayings, and we were hunters and fishermen, and growing up, and so he was an engineer by degree, an electrical engineer, and he used to say I could have been a brain surgeon if I wanted to be, and it was like a joke in our family, and he could have, but we were always together building things, always. If you have a hunting place or you're an outdoorsman of any kind, there's always something to build, and so.
So you had some natural skills that
I think
developed over the years.
For sure. And my grandfather used to say all the time, you're going to be a great architect someday. I was drawing houses from 3, 5, however it is, how old you are when you're drawing. I mean, literally my oldest sister, my mom she sent me a letter one time that of a house that I drew her. She had an accident and was in the hospital for some extended period. And I was probably 7 at the time, and about 7, and I drew a house, and she kept it, and she sent it to me in a letter, and it was really neat to see here's this house I had drawn as a little 7-year-old kid, and how ultimately we ended up where we are. But to answer your question directly, so there was always that affinity and love to build, and I had built about 10,000 decks, in my lifetime, fences and things.
Okay. That's encouraging to know that there was that there was some skills that had been developed throughout life. It wasn't totally just like first time ever. I'm just going to go figure this out. You had done this a few times.
Well, the project expanded, and I hadn't done about 40% of it ever before, and I had to figure out quickly how to make it happen. So. So we'd expanded from there, and then I don't even remember how they came to us, but another couple, he was actually an American airline pilot, said, "Hey, we need a garage addition on our house," and I'm like, "I can do that." And so it went.
That's a little bigger undertaking than a deck and a fence.
It was, but we figured it out. I found some really great help, and I did, again, as I said, my God-given talent is architecture and design. So I drafted it and drew it and knew it. And it's a weird thing. I've said for so many years, I visualize construction like a computer model. And it's just one of those things. I think it's everyone's certain individual talent. I visualize the construction of it in my brain. So the layout, the plans, the whole thing, it just kind of unravels. And that's how I see it. And so I was able to have this innate ability for engineering, and that's a different thing. And I inherited it from my mom and my dad,
So the serendipity of the universe right now. And in my meditation this morning, this was one of the excerpts from it. And I think it feels more than appropriate to share. Dreams are different from your calling. Your calling is sure and strong. Your calling, the thing that God has placed in you for the good of the planet and the good of your heart, isn't going anywhere. There's a person named Rebecca Lyons says your calling is where your burdens and your talents collide. And it was talking about the comparison between dreams, which are these like big, bold, audacious ideals that we have for the life that we want to build and the life we want to live. And I think it's amazing to kind of hear this part of the story where, your calling is almost like to build things, to create, right? And to architect. And then how you bring those dreams to life is, in this case, through a construction company, and as we'll get to in a moment, in many other areas. Sharon, I'd like to hear a little bit about little Sharon. Like, what were you like as a child? What was exciting you? What were the things that you dreamed big about?
So I'm an only child, which makes us a lot different because he's from this Italian family. I know you can relate. 4 kids.
Yep, I can definitely relate to the Italian family.
Very, and I'm Cancer. I don't put that much on horoscopes, but it's like to be an only child and then be like a crab that can kind of retreat into yourself. I'm really good by myself a lot, but I'm also don't like to share sometimes.
Okay.
Which I still revert back to that. But
don't touch Sharon's plate of food.
My mom and dad met in Chicago. He was a jazz musician and really cool. And tomorrow's the 1 year anniversary of him passing. So it's like, but he was a really amazing Renaissance man. I mean, if he were sitting here right now, you would want to go sit with him. He would be in a crowd, but he'd always pick someone, on his own. And
he was brilliant.
He would read, I went over to their house last year and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm reading the encyclopedia. Remember when they had the little ones with the little tabs on there?
That's amazing.
But he was always doing things like that, playing his sax in the corner of the room so he could hear himself. And so even though when I was younger, I didn't appreciate that, I still feel like that really built up in me, even though I wanted to listen to the B-52, which dates me. But we
all love the B-52.
Yeah. We were from Chicago and then moved to El Paso. Again, big city, smaller town at that time. But I always had this kind of big city thing. When I was 12 years old, I lived for Vogue magazine. And September issue, and I'd go to the grocery store with my mom and I'd be like, hey, it's September. And so she'd give it to me. And one night I literally stayed up the whole night and I wallpapered my walls. And I was like, Mom, I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to live in a penthouse on Park Avenue, 12 years old.
Wow.
And then I ended up, flash forward, I had an opportunity to go on my own and I went and lived in a penthouse on Park Avenue. But, that was a big part of who I became. Just going out on my own and doing that at 21, working in cosmetics and high-end retail, just following that dream that I had somewhere inside of me, so that's kind of my story. And then came back home and that's when we met.
Wow. How did y'all meet?
Fun story.
We actually met. It was Super Bowl Sunday.
Okay.
And the Cowboys had won.
Okay.
So that's a really long time ago.
That was the last time they won. So we're wondering if they win again, you might be concerned about Jason and Sharon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So we met.
We met like every respectful couple in a bar.
Perfect.
So, it was really great. We met and we had crossed paths for several years and places actually saw each other. Sharon was working in a restaurant in Dallas and I would frequent the place and, we'd see each other and, all this time had passed. And so the night we actually met, she came by, a friend had left and left her standing with a pitcher of beer and she around and she says, do you mind if I put this here? And I turned around and we literally simultaneously pointed our fingers at each other and went, I know you.
Wow.
Like that. And that was it. And those days I was slick. I somehow managed to get a napkin and a pen to get her phone number.
Nice. So, that's impressive.
Again, dating ourselves.
That's impressive.
That's when you use paper and a pen.
Okay. I'll have to go back and Google that. Hey, I've got pen and paper right here. I'm coming back to
that's right.
Things we can touch and feel and trying to disconnect from technology as much as possible. I'm not even wearing my Apple Watch on a regular basis currently because it's at Apple being repaired. But I have every intention to kind of disconnect more now than ever, which I think is important. Total aside. Wow. What a really cool part of the story. So other than mourning the tiny part of the dream where you may not have the Park Avenue penthouse, sounds like it was a pretty spectacular time. What was it like living in New York City at that time period?
I mean, it was awesome. I lived on 8th Street between 5th and 6th for the longest. And my window overlooked the Paris Theater before it moved up by the plaza. And, I also lived on 40th between 5th and 6th, right at Bryant Park in the library.
Oh my
so
gosh.
it was like
obsessed with that area.
Yeah. It was kind of before Bryant Park was gentrified. But it was just everything I could have ever wanted it to be. So much fun, just so much discovery, and it's really a part of who I am, and proving to myself that I could go out and live on my own. I mean, I self-funded that,
Oh, yeah,
for the most part.
that's
Occasional
amazing.
money for Christmas, but
Yeah. Well, it's always good
I've
to have a
always
good Christmas
been kind
present,
of, yeah,
especially when it's cash. Those are the best
yeah,
kind of Christmas presents.
right.
And I'd like to
So,
interject here and say that, Sharon gives me credit so much for being the one to push and do things on my own. And, to have you're the one that she said it a minute ago, didn't she? You have the strength and the stability. But if you listen to her, she really is the one with so much strength and individuality to be able to do that on her own at that time. Right. I think it's amazing that she's able to bend and ebb, and what she doesn't give herself credit for is the strength that she really has to do the things that we're doing together now, which is really, really awesome.
Wow. That's so powerful. Shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what we all aspire for, is to surround ourselves with those that are just incredibly amazing humans that we can trust and that we can build a life with. That's everything. So, it's interesting. So now this construction company is in motion. You've now gone from decks to additions to homes, and I'm going to assume from there it just kind of took off, and the two of you apparently built a pretty spectacular business out of thin air, in a sense, which is just amazing. I believe it was one of the largest construction companies in Dallas. Is that correct?
I don't know what the largest, but we did a lot of work.
Okay.
It was pretty awesome. We got to expand into a lot of areas that it branched into commercial restaurant work and multi-tenant work, designing hotel properties, high-end residential, and then so the really neat thing is, I think in retrospect, I look back, you can always look at a business and say, hey, it was successful because it made money. But I look back now and think, yes, that was great, and we needed it, right, to support a lifestyle and to buy a house and to take care of your kids and your family. But I look back now and I think that I really recognize that I was, again, from a spiritual perspective or a faith perspective, for me, it was so many times I wanted to separate or escape, and I still felt like I needed to be there for the families and the people who hired me. And so many times it got to be, it's not about the job, it's about the home and the family.
Mm.
I used to say a house is a box. It's not a great sales pitch. But
you're gonna spend a lot of money on this box, but it's totally worth it because of all these reasons.
But you really realize, for I say us again, I can count back, 99.9%. Every business has friction personalities because we're human beings, right? And not every one of them was perfect and lovely and fun, but really most of them were just really outstanding, and most of them to this day are went from clients to friends, and over the years, and that was really a neat thing to build relationships, not just homes for people.
Are just builders, people that love to create awesome, wonderful things across family and friends and physical structures. I think that's amazing. And so, as this journey is evolving, you have built your own dream home as well, correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that moment in time. That seems like a pretty fascinating part of the story as well.
So the funny thing about being married to a visionary, especially one that builds things, is looking for a house. So, get excited about something. You're like, I saw this house. I love it. It's on a corner. It's got this, it's got that. And he walks in and he's like,
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So we did finally, we were in our first home that we had bought, and we wanted to move to this neighborhood, that I was talking about earlier. And some friends from church that lived across the street said, hey, these people are selling their house. Because it was one of those neighborhoods where stuff was constantly being sold before hitting the market. And we went over there, and it just happened to be like it was a half acre and kind of this, really residential neighborhood. There were two little blocks that had these bigger yards, and the lady was landscaped. I mean, she's an
arborist.
And had this amazing, it was just a really cool place. But anyway, it turned out that we were able to get that house, which ended up being so great because of what I was saying earlier with people and kids, and just a great place for them to spend that part of their life.
Yeah, there's something powerful about that. Also
knowing that had we stayed there, that would have not been the same, because the kids get older. It becomes about what the kids are doing, not that all the parents like each other, because that's how it starts with kids. You're like, oh, you have a 2-year-old, I have a 2-year-old. Let's hang out, and then the next thing you know, that's a girl and that's a boy, and that one's going to go play soccer and that one's going to play baseball. And, so that changes too. So although it was a hard transition for me, it wasn't, I'm not longing for something. That was a great time in our lives. That was the best time so far in our lives, but it's not the best time of our lives. It's like that evolves too.
Yeah. So you're in this moment where you've kind of hit a peak in your life. And then
I'm sorry I'm over here. If you're seeing this podcast, I'm trying not to laugh hysterically, because as Sharon's telling this amazing story in retrospect, I'm thinking of the funniest stories about her. I'm going to give you one brief one. So the house had a lot of xeriscape. In fact, it was known, and it was because of the previous owners who was an arborist and did all of this xeriscape. And Sharon said, I am not going to live in a house full of cactuses, because I grew up in El Paso and I need something different, more lawn. And granted, it was 3/4 of an acre with a lot of grass. Like, we had massive lawns, but so we got a call one day from the Dallas Morning News and said, we'd like to publish your house and put it on the cover of the newspaper, and for xeriscape yards and all these things. And so I'm getting to this. Yeah.
Okay.
And all.
Got it.
And the funny thing is that I'm like Edward Scissorhands at 5:30 a.m. on Saturday. It's my therapy at this time in the city, because I'm an outdoors guy, and it was in the middle of a city, and I wanted to run and scream to get away. And so they called. It just so happens that I was out of town the week that they were coming to photograph the house, and I said, if these people show up and they put you on the cover of the magazine. And so sure enough, there was Sharon quoted in her fancy shoes on the cover of the Dallas Morning News for the lawn care. And I was the one who spent countless hours Edward Scissorhanding that every leaf in the yard, it was like pruned to perfection, and so I'm sorry to be laughing, but that's when you talk about the house. That's all I remember, it's just kind of funny. So good story.
That's phenomenal. Wow. So you're the caretaker of the lawn.
Yeah.
Whether you are or not.
Yeah.
The news said it, so that's what it is. And people are calling you and asking for tips, and you're just like, I don't know. This is not my jam.
I'm down hospitality.
Question at the grocery.
Like, spiritual gift, hospitality.
Yes.
Gardening.
Yeah. Which makes sense for the part of the journey that we're headed to. Yeah. It's interesting. I've always said I will either be in the middle of the city in a high rise or way out in the country. There's like no in between for me. And so I can definitely relate very well to your spirit of just the buzz that comes with being in the city, but also like the serene kind of calm that comes with being way out in the country. And I think both are really beautiful. And the reason I like them is I feel like there's a level of authenticity in those two types of environments that's just very special. I can't quite make sense of it, but I can definitely feel it and in many ways. And I think that's so powerful. So as we get moving forward here, you are living your best life and boom, Jason says, I have an idea.
And that is always scary.
which is now when I use that phrase.
Like if we're in the morning, we always have our coffee in bed. We kind of get going, check the devices before we, ease into the day. And he's like, I have an idea. And I'm like, no.
No.
I've not
Just
had my
immediate
coffee.
shutdown.
That's it. I'm taking a shower.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. So tell us about the idea that y'all had, or maybe Jason had. It sounds like you didn't have the idea.
I think it did, back to finding the property. Then we were like, we have all this property.
So when y'all first purchased the property, it wasn't necessarily to move to, or it was?
We just wanted some land.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Got it.
So then we
Sky
were
and I
kind of
want
like,
land in the hill country.
what are
we have forever? And
yeah.
So one of my,
but we haven't pulled the trigger. That's the difference.
Right.
Y'all pulled the trigger. That's also where I need some notes, because you say yes, and then we sit here and debate ourselves.
You
for
have analysis
20 hours
paralysis.
as to why we shouldn't do it,
Yeah.
and then we talk ourselves out of it by the end of the conversation. Every time we go to the hill country, but sorry, please keep going.
No, that's okay.
This is a bit of the brief journey before heading to that point was really, again, as we mentioned, we spent a lot of time building this construction business, and I was having a bit of burnout, and just really kind of, you talk about the humanity of and the journey behind all of it. For me, it was, I'm always questing what's next. I'm on a quest, and I feel like I'm being driven from behind the scenes on a daily basis of, even with the project that we now have built that's larger than life for the two of us in our realm of things. I'm still, dare I even say it, I'm going to get hit over here, on the quest of what's next, and it's like, okay, you've done that. Now where are we headed and what are we doing? And so I think that I have a good friend, as I mentioned, who we were wanting to buy some land, and he was like, we're considering buying a place in the Florida Panhandle, which we've spent every summer there since our kids were born, vacationing on those beaches. And we were considering that. And our friend was like, don't buy a dumb beach house. You'll never get there. Buy a farm and get some dirt bikes, and I'm like, that makes more sense. It's easier, it's closer, and it makes more sense for us. So we were kind of on that journey, and then literally on a drive home from one of our daughters, she rode horses for a lot of years, and it was in the East Texas area where we are now. And we were driving, my son and I were driving home, and kind of this, I would say, epiphany might be a general descriptor of that idea, but it kind of hit me for a 2-hour drive over, okay, you do this land, and it was really an answer to what I'd been praying about for at least 2 years, which was, what's next, and I'm kind of burnt out, and where are we headed, and where's all this going, and I don't want to be doing this and this pace at, when I'm older. And now I think I work twice as hard as I did then, but again, it's just, but I have more energy now. It's crazy than I did then. So that was really kind of the path that was getting us to what the next step was.
He was talking about Florida, and that's someplace that we always loved going. We honeymooned in Seaside when we got married, and kind of kept going. Yeah. Year after year.
Just hearing you say that, I have so many emotions that just stir up, because 30A is one of my favorite places in the world.
Yeah.
I love that
it's
area.
special.
Yeah.
It is.
It started in Sandestin because his dad had a place there. And then someone said, go to Seaside. And so we went to Seaside on our honeymoon.
We were like, where's that?
Yeah.
We never went past.
We're like, the
we
Truman
never went
Show.
past Sandestin,
Yeah. And so, it just kind of evolved into this. I mean, our kids grew up on those beaches. Yeah. Some years we would go for, twice a year, and we still try to get out there at least once a year. But, through that and other places that we enjoyed traveling, kind of evolved into, it's hard to get to a lot of places. I love California and going to the wine country. I even love going from Dallas down to the hill country, but that's still a time commitment, and especially driving to Florida. And so we were just really talking about that. And then, you say the lights went off, and it was like, what if we kind of put these things together and built our own retreat
Mm.
for people to come to that are like us, that live hectic lifestyles in, in Dallas, but can get away. I mean, you can go for one night, two's better, but you still, without having to recover from, when you travel somewhere and it's taking you like 3, 4, 5 hours,
Sure.
you get there and you're like, okay, let's check into the hotel, let's chill for a second, and then let's go grab go to the pool or get a glass of wine. And, with where we ended up so close to Dallas, it was like you exhale when you go through the gates and you can kind of start your relaxation and rejuvenation, immediately.
Yeah. I love that. I agree. There's something so special about just being able to go to a space where you're visiting, but then it starts to feel like home. That's a really wonderful experience, and that's rare and special for sure. So you're now moving to Arp, Texas, because Jason had an idea.
Walt, yeah.
Yeah, Walt had an idea, which leads me to another quote that I was thinking about this morning as I was thinking about all the excitement of the conversation today. And it is a Walt Disney quote. And so since you endearingly call Jason Walt, maybe we just call him Walt for the rest of the show.
We should.
We keep moving forward, opening new doors because we're curious. And curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. And so you have this new path happening. And Sharon, from your perspective, like idea, statement comes out of Walt's mouth and you're like, oh shit, what's about to happen? And how are you feeling in this moment once you know what the idea is?
Well, I will say in his defense, it was collaborative.
Okay.
Because when we kind of started talking about this, we got friends together. We were like, what do you think about this? And we really spent a lot of time like deciding what it was going to look like. We, with our little bungalows, they're kind of a nod to a place in Napa. And then the colors were a nod to Seaside. And, we really thought out what we were going to be doing and made it into something that where we wanted to go based on our other things.
So when y'all decided to move to ARP with the land that you already had, was the idea that you were going to start building the resort? Was that like the original plan, or was that a later part of the... Oh, okay, got it. So opening the resort was like the idea. Okay.
So you're skipping a pretty major step.
Cool.
In
Please.
the story.
Yes.
And the major
step
step is that from kind of conception to idea to execution, there was quite a bit of I'm not doing that, and and that's not a criticism by any means. It was, and that this is where, again, I will multiple times through this podcast say, I have to give my wife so much credit, because when you are me and you're driven to do certain things, I am still relying on her strength, compassion, and companionship through this, right?
Yeah.
And so,
because you make decisions together, and
we absolutely make decisions
so
together.
Powerful.
But but I was so, and am, was is not the right word there, am so convinced and driven and moved by what I believe is a plan for the two of us, that we had to get to that point that she just mentioned, visiting with friends and talking about it. But, we remind that we had just built our, quote unquote dream home, which I now laugh at all the time. It's like, God has I think the best sense of humor of all, because we all have sense of humor. So he created it. So let's give him the credit for it, right? He's laughing the most when you say, I did this great thing. He's like, no, you didn't do anything. But in doing that, it was, there were so many things we can now, and we've talked about this so many times together, can look back at the journey again, just in that time frame, to get us from, we built the forever dream house, to we're going to sell everything we have, our home, our business, the majority of our business, our friends, our family, our neighborhood, and the kids and the school, and everything we had built, we thought we were building, we gave up, right? Wow. And that's a big. Now, I mentioned to you the first, I could name the big one. That's probably, after marrying this one and having kids, that, we'll lump those together, family. The third biggest change was exactly at that point too, because it was, and it has been just a complete leap of faith for us to say, okay, we spent all this years getting to this point, and now we're going to, turn the page. And so it wasn't easy.
I mean, it's pretty fascinating. You've built together not only this very successful business and a family and a community, which in many senses is like the pinnacle of what humans desire. And then you just decide yet again to have an idea and completely pivot. Like, goes back to this like kind of continuous behavior that seems to be very core to the two of you as a family, as a couple, as partners in life that are doing life together, where you've kind of cannonballed into your reality and you're choosing to constantly shift and change and evolve and believe in yourselves. It was the Great Resignation OG right here that is Sharon, all the way over to like kind of where you are in this new moment. But I think one of the main differences is, and as you said, I've found it's easy when you're in a phase of life where you have very little to lose.
That's right.
It's a lot harder to do that when life has shifted and changed, and now you're at a pretty wonderful point where you have family, you have community, you're not worried about where your next meal is going to come from. Like, that's a nice position to be in life. Like, that's really something that's rare and special. And yet again, you say, well, we're just going to take another hard pivot and see what happens. But you believed in yourselves. And that is so powerful. So as you're now on this journey, you're saying, let's go and create this thing. How do you start to build this and bring it to life? And what were some of the emotions that are going through both of you on this part of the journey?
Go ahead.
No.
So we did have a little period. We ended up selling our house and we weren't ready to move out here. And so we moved into a rent house, which ended up being good because our daughter finished middle school, our son finished elementary, and then we got to move at the start of high school and the start of junior high. And that allowed us to also break away from that community that we had. And it made the move, especially for me, easier because I wasn't leaving this dream life that we had created, that was perfect, as I said before, perfect for that time. So we had a little bit of a break between, making that big move. So it was a nice segue for me before we, because we built the house and finished the bungalows at the same time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the main building at the same time.
Okay.
We did that building in tandem.
That's smart. And so you were building yourselves a home on the property and then also building the beginning phases of the business. And so now the resort, the business is here. It is built. It is finished, at least in its first kind of moment and first iteration. And so did y'all at that point move to ARP?
We didn't open until after we moved there.
Okay. How long were y'all there before you opened?
Of 2015. And then we had a couple of soft opens and then one other event that we had done prior to that, but we opened in the fall.
Okay. And so now High Hill Farm is here. It is fully alive. It's 2016. Tell us about the name. Where did y'all come up with that?
It was really him, because he would go and sit on the property. He spent a lot of time out there before we moved just because he was having to fish,
Yeah.
And he came home, he would park his truck, put the flap down, tailgate, and he'd sit and he'd just overlook the property. And he called me one day and he said, "What do you think about High Hill Farm?" I was like, "I like it."
So Jason, why High Hill?
Well, a bit of a caveat to her story was that I actually awakened one morning. We had talked a lot about names, and everyone kept telling us it'll come from the property. It'll come from the property. And we're like, okay, whatever that means.
Like the earth speaking to you,
and
nature.
I said to her, I was like, what's the name of that Target brand? And she, she said the name, like, oh, that's not the same. I was thinking it was in my head. It was High Hill. And
so you were concerned it was the same as the Target brand. You're like, dang it, I can't use this.
Dang it, I'm not smart enough for that. I'm like, so it's High Hill. And so that we're like, oh, what is that brand? That makes perfect sense.
Archer Farm.
Archer Farms, yeah. Nice. And so the property, we actually have the highest plateau in all of the area and the valley there. At the property. And so there are a lot of things that came from the name that are synonymous with the land itself.
That's really cool. And I mean, East Texas is such a lush, green,
it's stunning
region.
It's beautiful.
I mean, you have the rolling hills, and they are just so spectacular. I remember when we stayed at the property, Sky and I, the first time with y'all, and came out. I think we arrived on a Thursday night, and we woke up Friday morning, and I got to see the dew on the grass. And I think I shared with y'all before, my grandparents lived in Nacogdoches for many years. And I used to love as a child waking up and seeing the dew on the grass. It just felt so special and so rare. And it just was such a reminder of how lush and green and beautiful East Texas really is. It's a spectacular part of the state. It's not an area that I think people often think of when they think of vacationing. But what you have built there is just a very magical, special place. It is the exhale, as you shared. And I want to touch on that a little bit more a little bit later in the conversation, because I think it's a really cool perspective. But if we kind of think about like where you are now in this moment, you have kind of had this epiphany, y'all have come up with the name, and you open up the property. And again, you're just kind of blind faith, leaning in, hoping that it achieves what you want it to achieve or becomes the thing that you're building it to be. What was that journey like?
Well, I would say it's still going on. Yeah. Always, as any growing business, we having done this now twice, the adage of 10,000 hours is actually true, right? I mean, I think it was 10,000 hours. It was 10 years in the construction business before I had to do no advertising because the phone just rang all the time, right? It was building something of quality and exception and striving for perfection as best as we could create it, that created a successful business of people understanding what you were building and expecting a certain thing. And I think for the two of us, we together have always strived for perfection and excellence in everything that we do. And building this business, we're at this point now where we're now 8 years. We're 2 years out from having the 10,000 hour mark, but we're constantly ebbing and flowing. And it's a journey, and for us, we chose a piece of property in the middle of the woods that no one often frequented in that area very much, and built what we hope is a world-class seaside Napa mixture, luxury resort property.
Some like Blackberry Farm vibes mixed
That's
in
it.
As well, for sure.
In the middle of East Texas.
I definitely felt that.
And so our journey has really been, I think, I said it to Sharon last night on the way home from dinner. We were talking about some things, and I said, we beat ourselves up a lot because we want so much for our property, for our employees, and then certainly for our guests to have this experience in everything that we do, because we strive for that so much, right? And all that we're building. But it's a journey. It's molding personalities. It's molding, experiences, and the food you eat and the bed you sleep in and the sounds you hear and the smells you smell, and so all of those things, to us, we pay so much attention to that detail. And I'm a perfectionist. I'll admit it, here. And so it's hard. Sharon tells me all the time I'm CDO, not OCD. I have to have it in order. And so
it's very fitting.
Because of that, I'm constantly seeing the imperfections. And it's a little bit of, for me, the journey is trying to just rest in what we've created a bit.
Yeah.
But it's almost an obsessive compulsive, I want for my guests to have this perfect experience, and that the chairs aren't aligned just right by the pool. Something's wrong, in my mind.
Well, and I mean, I'm a firm believer that design is in the details. It's in the micro experiences that we have. And you've had 14 unsolicited publications. You've been on the cover of many magazines at this point. I mean, you have really created something very special that people gravitate to. I mean, Sky and I wanted to stay there for years before we actually got out that way. And we went to the Chimp Chat. So naturally that made sense that over at Chimp Haven in Shreveport. And we're
going to have to send them a donation for getting you there.
Yeah. And we didn't personally want to stay near Chimp Haven. There wasn't a lot around Chimp Haven. And so it made a lot more sense for us to find this really special, magical place called High Hill Farm. And I mean, we just fell in love with it. It was just such a magical experience. And, the two of you have just created something truly special. And I'd like to go to the Exhale, Sharon. You have just done an amazing job of creating, alongside Jason, this very special place and space for people to gather. What does the Exhale mean to you?
I think it's just like that feeling when there's so much going on and you just stop and you literally exhale, but it's just that big, long, where you can feel the load lighten and you're not so worried about what you're doing or that your day is filled. You're just getting to be in a moment where, you know what, maybe the internet isn't great. Maybe you can't stream that Netflix show, but you get to walk around, you get to see the dew, you get to look at the vines in the vineyard, you get to walk on a trail that a lot of people don't really get to do very often. And that's what I think that is, just getting back to the basics.
I love that. Scott and I were talking, my amazing co-host, who not here today, which is strange. It's my first time to ever do a show without him, and does feel
we miss him.
It does feel a little weird, but we're looking forward to having him.
His voice is so commanding.
I know.
I know. It's like James Earl Jones is in the room.
Oh, it's incredible. His vibe, his spirit, his voice, all the things. So it is a different kind of day not having him here, but we definitely miss him. Wish he was here. And one of the things that him and I had talked about when we had a chance to experience the wonder and magic of High Hill was this kind of idea of the Exhale and really being one with nature. And he was sharing with me Eastern philosophy and how in Eastern philosophy, there's this whole kind of point of view around how we become one with nature, and how by becoming one with nature, that then lends itself to be able to exhale, because we're present in a moment in the midst of, I'd almost say nature is the purest form of humanity, right? It is that moment where you are one with God, you are one with the universe, you are one with existence. Like, there is very little noise and distraction to even be able to get in the way. And I wish he was here to probably help me make sense fully of the exact quote that he is so great at remembering. But that was kind of the gist of it. And I just thought that was so powerful and so special. And when you think about the role that the Exhale plays in our daily life, we all need that. We need to get out of context. We need to take moments to just be, because mental health and well-being is so incredibly important. And it's not something that necessarily always gets the attention that it deserves. I was with my sister and brother-in-law and my niece and nephew this weekend with Sky outside of Dallas in the Rockwall area. And we were talking about just how important mental health is and how much it needs to be a regular conversation, and how in some communities it is and other communities it isn't. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about. And what y'all do is you create this beautiful space for people to just exhale, to be present, to get out of context, to focus on our well-being and our wellness, and allow that to really be to have a space and a place that you've built and created to do that, that's just amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
There's so many things of what we're trying to accomplish with High Hill that that transcends, and anyone can go to the one of a million amazing properties in Texas alone that are available there, but ours really is somewhat of a vision project. It's layering experience and opportunity and emotion and all the things. And I mentioned to you early on as we were discussing kind of the building of the construction phase of what we did together, and it became about the people. And what we realize is that our what we've been really blessed with is the love that we have for each other and the relationship we have through our families and our friends and our network. And for us, we've been given this next layer of sharing that with the people who come to High Hill, and hopefully a respectful, loving way. And it's been amazing. I told Sharon when we began this project that we have no idea who's going to walk through our door. And we've had people from all over the world who've literally stayed at our property and from every walk of life. And it's been amazing to hear the stories and for people who have come back. I'll share briefly a story of a young lady came to our property once and was just dealing with some marital things and kind of there for the weekend, enjoying the property herself. And her marriage was on a declining lane, I guess you would say. And so she was there for a period of time for a week, I don't know, 2 or 3 days on the property. And a year later, we got a call, and she and her husband were coming back, and she asked Sharon if she could have a minister friend of theirs come out. They were going to renew their vows, and they're like, "Oh, that's amazing," And so she came back, and she took Sharon aside at one point and told her, my husband, after we've worked through some things, and she said, my weekend at High Hill was all about prayer and meditation of where I was in my marriage and where I was in life and what was going on. And I feel like I had this bit of awakening, and I kind of went through this, and we've managed to work things out, and we decided to renew our vows. And when my husband asked where we should do it, she said, where else would we do it but High Hill? And so, you hear these little stories like that, and it's not only incredible, it's incredibly humbling to think that, here it is, we just created this business, but this business is responsible for being a part of someone's life change. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's impactful as a couple who, are working hard to build a business.
Yeah.
All of these things are happening behind the scenes that we have no idea are happening. And that's incredible to be a part of that.
I think one of the things that I love most about your story is you didn't build a business. You built an experience, and you built a space and a place to experience the exhale, as you've shared. And it happens to be a business. It reminds me a lot of someone like an Apple, right? I've always seen them as the think differently company. They're not a computer company. They're not even a technology company, in my opinion. They're a think differently company. And I think that's why they've been able to so successfully pivot into every industry known to man at this point. It feels like, not literally, but it feels that way.
Literally.
And disrupt, and not only disrupt, but take over. Music is now synonymous with iTunes. It's amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is.
The MP3 player, synonymous with iTunes, synonymous with Apple. Computers as well, but only one piece of that puzzle, the smartphone. Just every time that they pivot into a new space, it was really just about how do we think differently? Meanwhile, other big technology brands try to do the same thing, and customers are like, you're a computer company. Why are you trying to get into music? Or why are you trying to navigate into other spaces? That's not who you are. Wall Street as well is like, what are you doing? This isn't your thing. Like, you need to stay focused, like stay in your lane, bro. And you're just very amazed by the kind of people, the kind of visionaries, the kind of partnerships that can not create a business, but create an experience and bring that to life in a way that is powerful, that's inviting, that's nurturing, that's enriching, and kind of makes people obsessed with what you're doing. I mean, I remember I was sitting on your property when we were there for the first time, and there's this beautiful outdoor fireplace and a couch that surrounds it. And there was a tree off in the distance at the edge of the property, and it's just swaying back and forth. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, the wonder and the magic that exists in a space like this, like the attention to detail, as you mentioned, I don't think that's by accident. I mean, it felt intentional. It felt on purpose. It didn't feel like it was by accident. And that was just such a rare and special moment to have. And it was like I was one with sky. I was one with God. I was one with the universe. I was one with the earth. Like I was just in this moment that just total clarity came. The exhale came. And that just, like, that was everything to me. It was a moment in time when I needed that. I had been through an insane personal experience only a few weeks before, had 5 people in my life die, had some pretty crazy stuff happen in personal life, all within a 6 to 8 week period. So I had all these little micro experiences that kind of became this macro experience. And I don't think there could have been a better moment in time to get to exhale at High Hill. And it was very rejuvenating, really special. So I'm very grateful for y'all and what you're building. And High Hill is evolving now. It's going from High Hill Farm to High Hill because it's expanding into an even broader vision. And Sharon, it sounds like Jason woke up again and said he had an idea.
Yep.
And what was that idea?
He's like, I think we should build a town.
Naturally. In the middle of East Texas.
When you put it like that. It kind of was.
Yeah.
Which again, when I say I have an idea, why everyone jumps. A very fast, funny story. I was in Dallas with our oldest, who just graduated from SMU. I was telling you, and I was telling her something, and I said, I have an idea about, and she goes, seriously, Dad? Literally. And so the funniest part of that story is I was working with the guys at the property the next day, and we were talking about a gate on the fence and some things like that. And we're always, we discuss every aspect of everything together, of course, about landscape and food and, everything on the property. We were in bed and I said, I have an idea and I was going to say about the thing she said, literally, seriously, Jason? And it was literally the night before Kate said, seriously, Dad? So you get no respect, just like Rodney Dangerfield.
So you can empathize with Walt Disney in many ways. And I am fascinated by what y'all are rocking. I mean, it's just, I remember when Sky and I showed up, we got there pretty late on a Thursday night and we were greeted by the team and they just briefly mentioned like, oh yeah, the family that owns High Hill is basically building like Seaside, kind of meets Napa, kind of meets Blackberry here in ARP. And I was like, that sounds really cool. Didn't fully understand it. I think we were there like a day or two and we drove by. You had mentioned, we had met y'all at this point and you had mentioned to go ahead and drive in and check it out. And you happened to be there when we drove by. And it's just amazing. I mean, you have basically seen like you've seen the red dirt of East Texas and a vision for what that red dirt could be molded into. And so what is that vision? And it's no longer a vision. It is here, it is alive, and it is very much in motion.
We were constantly saying we're going to, and I have to, every time I say that, I tell Sharon, I got to stop saying that because it is now a reality, as you said, and it's pretty exciting. You want to jump in?
Yep.
Well, the vision for that was, and my sisters joke with me all the time because they said, we really did this so I could keep building things. And there's some truth to that. I would say that, when you love so passionately to do what you do, and again, I always say I don't have a lot of talents, but my gift is creation, and in creation and buildings and architecture for me, that I absolutely eat, sleep, breathe it. I wake up at 3 a.m. with, I used to jokingly and kind of still to this day, I'm asked to design things and I'll purposely wait about 2 weeks before I present them because they're in my brain by the time I wake up the next morning, and as fast as I can get them on the computer, I'm done. So it's just one of those things that it's not that I'm that good and that smart. It's just that's my thing. Right. And I love it with a passion, every minutia detail. And so, we have some dear friends and now business partners in it as well, Mark and Suzanne Knutson, who we love passionately as well. They are family to us, just the sweetest people you've ever met. And so we partnered and purchased all of this adjacent property that originally was the piece that was on the list of properties to buy. And then
this was that bordering idea that you weren't loving.
That's right. And then it was, and it's
when I went off the land.
That's right. And combined it with additional real estate that tied the whole resort now. And it's now High Hill Resort Community. So it's a whole expansion. And so again, we were like, why not? Let's just really create this beachside experience combined with this Mediterranean Napa feel of architecture and design. And so we've literally built a lake and 70,000 feet of white sand beaches and 3,000 person music amphitheater and the Central Park and a full service, full concierge community that is anchored and perimetered with world class homes architecture, Mediterranean style architecture. So for us, again, like the farm, it was all about full service. Talking about the exhale. I grew up the youngest of four, as I mentioned, in New Orleans with hunting and fishing.
And you're the only boy, right?
Only boy.
Yeah, 3 older sisters.
Yeah. So I
learn a lot.
We had to, the air conditions out, go there and fix it before everyone shows up on, Friday. And then now everyone's leaving. Now go clean the camp and, so I spent my whole life fixing and cleaning and preparing and whatever. And then, growing with kids. And I've thought so long, people now especially don't have the time. And you can have a lake house somewhere close by, but it's the same scenario. So we talk about it all the time with potential buyers and then guests on the property that's great. But you hope the air condition works on Friday when you show up, and you hope the kid that's supposed to mow the lawn for you, and you've got 12 friends coming over for Friday night at your lake house, and something doesn't work, and now you're kind of SOL, right? And so we wanted to mitigate and eliminate all of that anxiety of having this and still allow something for everyone to do. So you show up at our property and you literally stay in your magnificent home with all of these amenities, and you can order tequila and crab claws for your refrigerator, and you leave and you hit checkout. Someone cleans it for you. So it's full service. And again, kind of back to that, just touching all the bases for our guests.
I mean, that's absolutely incredible. And it is a special experience. And seeing the vision turning into reality, I'm sure just must be one of the most fulfilling experiences that y'all have had in your journey so far. Hopefully there's not a hard pivot too soon. Hopefully this one gets to have a little bit more runway before y'all pivot to the next thing. But, one thing that really comes to mind, Sharon, you had mentioned this earlier about wanting to be in the middle of the city, and now you're way out in the country. But you're bringing that new urbanism kind of vibe to the middle of the country. So you're finding a way to not only build a town as a couple, which is just phenomenally fascinating, but also to really do it in a style that I think doesn't really exist in many places in Texas. This is a pretty new concept for a state like Texas. We see it in Florida and we see it in other parts of the country, but you're also tip of the spear, as y'all seem to be in your journey in life, kind of carving out a whole new way of thinking about how we build and construct and create community and bring people together. Yes, some of that, shifted and changed when you left Dallas, but my gosh, talk about abundance and a just exponential growth of community. Your community now is a global community of people who have fallen in love with High Hill. And as it continues to evolve and grow, it's just going to be so special. So what's next? Where do you continue to grow on this journey? And as this resort community is coming to life, what does success look like?
I think it's continued growth at this moment, and for the first time, I think in our building stage, we haven't had a massive pivot. It's more of an expansion. And we somewhat call this our legacy project. Again, we're really now at a stage in life where we're building still a business, but looking at it more from a long-term perspective. Like what will this look like for our children and our children's children if they decide to retain that? But, again, always, I think I'm on a little bit of an expansion kick into other countries and it's all about brand building. Again, that luxury experience, that luxury property, and that universal use of what we're doing and where we're headed. And so I think that, we're kind of having, I use the word loosely, having inklings of, what could this look like in Europe or another country as a piece of an expanded next level luxury property that's related to the High Hill brand.
I mean, that vision is amazing. And hopefully this is a manifestation that's happening on your journey. But the idea that a luxury brand founded in the rolling hills of East Texas becomes a global brand, a global luxury brand that is perceived that way, and something that people can trust and have confidence in, that when they go to a High Hill experience to exhale anywhere in the world, they know what they're going to get. And I think that's an amazing ambition and dream. One thing I'd love to touch on with both of you is, as you were talking, this just really came to mind for me. So often we want to bring our dreams to life. And there's moments when it happens. There's moments when we have the opportunity to mourn that dream because it doesn't come alive the way that we had hoped. I think it's important to mourn some of those dreams that may not materialize the way that we would like them to. But in this case, this dream is fully alive and you are living in this magical moment. And I would just be so curious, and it might be a hard question to answer, but what does it feel like every day to know that you are living a dream of having built a resort and getting to bring people together, to gather, to exhale, to experience all that you have created, and to go from an idea that you had to now living in the midst of this? What is that like for you?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think that as it continues to evolve, I'm just excited to see what's going to happen. I'm excited for, these people that are taking a leap of faith with us to buy these homes, for them to come and stay there and bring the family and then really see that come to life.
What are you most excited about as you continue onward in the journey? Opening new doors, being curious. Walt.
Sharon and I are a good balance because, when you are, if you want to call me a visionary, when you are wired,
when you look at red dirt and see a town, I would say you are now officially a visionary. Yeah, that is a very real, you have hit the accolade. You have graduated with the degree, not only rebellious optimist, both of you, but visionary is definitely now officially a thing.
Okay, whatever you want to call me. Crazy might be a better word.
That's also fine. But we're all crazy until we're not so crazy.
That's right. That's right.
Or until our ideas aren't so crazy.
I think there's always a balance, of, I'm the, wake up at 155% or 200%, whatever that percentage is, let's go, let's create. Nothing stands in my way. Let's just get this done. And I'm blessed. I always say all the time that when I get really tired, I know my days are numbered, because right now I'm 53, as I mentioned, I feel like I'm 20. I'm ready to create every day, all day. And
well, if you pull from the amazing philosopher Jay-Z, 40 is the new 20.
It definitely is.
You're pretty much
maybe 30.
Yeah. So
I think you're 25.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The way it multiplies, you're about 23.
That is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a much slower progression.
And Sharon focuses so much on the day-to-day things and, paying the bills and, and how do we cover this and where's that coming from and, how are we doing? So I think
it's pretty important to have someone that takes care of that.
I know you've mentioned
Rocks
that's
that.
you and Sky, right?
Oh, for sure, yes.
So I say that.
I wish that was my gift.
That it's exciting for me to do this with her. And I've said this throughout this entire thing, and I'll say it again. I give, so many people give me so much credit on a daily basis because I'm the visionary. I'm the lead singer of the band, but the reality is that it takes the entire band for the lead singer to put out a song, and she's the entire band. I mean, so there's so much that goes on that I could not create if I didn't have Sharon taking care of all the things. So what's exciting about it? What's exciting about it is getting us to 10,000 hours. That's what I'm excited. I am excited that the phone rings so much that we don't ever think about booking a room or a home or a thing again, and that we have built an operating business that we can then someday rest in for our family and beyond. And then what is next? Because for me, once it's built, I mean, I'm already, 20% in, and I'm going, what are we doing next? And that's where the European pieces come from. I have no desire to stop the expansion of what I believe is the new brand. And, people ask all the time, I'll end on this one fun story that I told you, I think, a long time ago, that there was a period of time as we were building the construction business that we had gone, from 0 to 80, pretty quickly in the term of building business. And I will say, we've gone from an idea, to build a resort, in Art, Texas in 8 years to building a town. That's a pretty fast leap, right? And so,
To say the least,
right? So I'm driving around Dallas, and stressing about everyone who's getting business, in the area that I had proposed business to other people. And I'm stressing about other people's work. And I mentioned to you that I literally a gigantic, thing came over me. Again, as a man of faith, I will say that I believe it was God directly telling me and almost audibly, stop worrying about the other guy's stuff. I've blessed you with enough of your own, and it's where we sit today. I think you could get wound up in all of the other businesses and hotels and the things that are being built in the amazing cities of Houston and Dallas and our surrounding Texas market, or you can just focus on the thing that you've got and be thankful for where you are and dwell in the people. As you said, if you love the people will come.
Yeah.
Quit stressing about all the other things on that. So we're super excited about what experiences are next. What next, Brad and Sky, do we get to meet on Saturday that we have no idea will become dear friends as I feel we've become?
Yeah.
And that's a gift. That's an incredible gift for us.
Well, and I love that you touched on that, because when the tide rises, we all rise.
Yep.
And there's so much power in that way of thinking. I think that it's easy for emotions like jealousy to creep in. But when you shared that story with me, I found it just very sobering and just very invigorating to just remember that every human is living the life that hopefully they want to build. And if they're not, hopefully at some point they'll be able to. And I think along that journey, we're all in this together in a sense. And it takes all of us. It takes us collectively as a species coming together to really create magical, awesome things for the future. And I think that so often we get very self-absorbed with our own ideals, but the way that you shared that was just very encouraging to think about it from this lens of, in as much as I have a vision and a dream, others have visions and dreams as well. And again, as the tide rises, we all rise. I love that. Anything else that you'd like to share as we're kind of rounding out the show today?
I just appreciate you visiting and listening to us and helping us share our story.
Oh, it's a privilege, for sure. We like to close every episode with a question. And I feel in this case, the question feels pretty clear, but is there a question, kind of single question that you want to ask the audience and put out in the universe that comes to mind?
I mean, that's a big question,
That's
right?
deep.
Well, I'll take a crack at it.
You take a crack.
I'm leaning somewhere between where do you exhale? How do you exhale? I think that feels pretty appropriate. What do y'all think? You like that one?
Sure.
Okay. So the question to the audience is, how do you exhale? Boom. Can you give us a boom?
Boom.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening. Join Brad and Scott next time on the Curiosity Podcast.